So let's take a look at the brain. Let's start with neural development. Neural development. Let's go through this. Now, we're going to break it down. We're going to break down the brain into three main divisions. Do you remember what they are? That's right. Prosencephalon, which becomes, that's right, telencephalon and diencephalon. And then we have those becoming cerebral hemispheres, and the thalamus and the hypothalamus for the diencephalon. So our first division of those three is the prosencephalon. The prosencephalon is going to become telencephalon and diencephalon. And then those final structures will be your cerebral hemispheres and your thalamus and hypothalamus. Our next main division is mesencephalon. Now remember, mesencephalon, aka midbrain, right? It remains mesencephalon throughout the first 5 weeks, and its final structure, that's right, midbrain, and those superior and inferior colliculi. And then our final division, rhombencephalon, also known as the hind brain. And with this one, it's going to become, that's right, metencephalon and myelencephalon. Now remember, metencephalon is where you're going to find the pons, along with the cerebellum, the brain's coordination master. And then rounding out the rhombencephalon, we got the myelencephalon, where we find the medulla oblongata. Okay? So take some time. I know this is just review, but spend some time with this, because I believe you'll see it again. Let's keep moving. Okay, let's go over a few definitions. Some definitions we need to know. A fold in the brain. What do we call a fold in the brain? That's right, a gyrus. Gyrus. Let's take a look at that real quick. So this would be an example. This would be an example of a gyrus here. It's a fold in the brain. Here's another example of a gyrus. These are all gyri, right? It's just a fold in the brain. Okay, our next one, a groove. A groove in the brain. What do we call a groove in the brain? That's right, sulcus. We call a groove in the brain a sulcus. So a sulcus looks like this. And this is our central sulcus. Here's another sulcus. This is the lateral sulcus. Okay, so a sulcus is just a groove in the brain. So in the brain, we have a collection of neural cell bodies inside the CNS that's equivalent to a ganglion. What do we call that? That's right, nucleus. Nucleus. In the brain, a collection of axons traveling through the brain, equivalent to a nerve in the PNS. What do we call that? That's right. Doing great today. Tract. Let's spend some time looking at the cerebral hemispheres, the lobes of the brain. Can you identify them? Here. That's right. That's the frontal lobe. What do we find in the frontal lobe? That's right. We find that this is a lobe concerned with math, personality, problem solving, planning, and motor. All in the frontal lobe. Good. Let's keep moving. How about here? That's right. Parietal lobe. Sensory interpretation. What about here? You got it. That's our occipital lobe. We're thinking visual cortex. Okay. What about here? That's right. Temporal lobe. Temporal lobe. Hearing, language, smell, taste, balance. Temporal lobe. Okay. Let's review some of the features of the cerebral hemisphere. Here at the green arrow, what is that green arrow pointing to? That's right. That's going to be our precentral gyrus. Precentral gyrus, primary motor cortex. Good. What about here? That's right. Lateral fissure or lateral sulcus. How about here? That's right. That's going to be our postcentral gyrus. Primary sensory cortex. Good. Here, red arrow. That's right. Central sulcus. Let's keep moving. Here is a mid-sagittal view of the brain. Let's identify some of these landmarks. What do we call this? That's right, parietal lobe. I was kind of fishing for that answer. Parietal lobe. How about here? That's right. That's our corpus callosum, a neural tract that allows communication across the brain, right to left. Corpus callosum. Good. Here. That's right. That's our septum there, right? It covers the lateral ventricles. P-E-L-L. Give me 1 second. Let me figure out how to spell this. Hey, Google, how do you pronounce P-E-L-L-U-C-I-D-U-M?
How do you pronounce P-E-L-L-U-C-I-D-U-M? It's spelled I-M-E-A.
No, hey, Google. Hey, Google, never mind. Hey, Google, how do you say P-E-L-L-U-C-I-D-U-M?
Here are some results from the web.
Okay, that's no help. Let's ask Siri. Siri can help. Hey, Siri, how do I pronounce P-E-L-L-U-C-I-D-U-M?
I found this on the web.
Oh, no one wants to say it. No one can just come out and tell me. Here we go.
Pellucidum.
Okay, pellucidum.
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 Pellucidum. Good. So, okay, I got it. Septum pellucidum covers the lateral ventricles. Septum pellucidum. Let's keep moving. How about here? That's right. Frontal lobe. That's our frontal lobe. What about here? Good. Good. Fornix. Communication tract for the limbic system. What about here? What lobe is this? That's right. Occipital lobe. Let's talk about the limbic system. The limbic system. Now, the limbic system has 3 parts. Let's go over each of those parts. We have the amygdala. And what goes on with the amygdala? That's right, emotional responses. What about the cingulate gyrus? Yeah, expression of emotion as action or gesture. And the hippocampus. That's right, smell and storage of short-term memories. Let's take a closer look at this. There we have a groove, a lateral sulcus. That's our post-central gyrus, central sulcus. That would be our parietal lobe, corpus callosum, frontal lobe, math, personality, problem solving, planning, and motor. Fornix, communication tract for limbic system. It's that. Yeah, occipital lobe, visual cortex. Okay, here we are. This is the slide I wanted. The limbic system. The limbic system. Remember, within the limbic system, we have 3 parts: amygdala, cingulate gyrus, and the hippocampus. The amygdala here, highlighted here, let me zoom in there for you. So there's the amygdala right here. This is where our emotional responses come from. Look how small that is, those structures are. Emotional responses. And then we have our cingulate gyrus, right? Our cingulate gyrus, expression of emotion as action or gesture. Let's take a look at that structure. There we go. That's the cingulate gyrus, expression of emotion as action or gesture. And we have the hippocampus, smell and storage of short-term memories. Hippocampus. There's those structures there. Hippocampus. Okay. Remember the limbic system. Connects to the hypothalamus to get ANS responses to emotions. Let's talk briefly about the basal nuclei. It's involved in motor coordination and short motor sequences. An important one to know is substantia nigra because it is damaged. It's damaged in Parkinson's disease. Substantia nigra. Let's take a closer look at that basal nuclei. Remember, several nuclei of cells collected in the deep regions of the cerebrum. So let's break this down into little chunks. So we'll start with the diencephalon and pituitary. Remember, the diencephalon is where we find the thalamus, hypothalamus, plus the pituitary, and the epithalamus, which houses the pineal gland. It's really a party up in there. So let's go through these. Here. That's right. This is the thalamus, right? Sensory relay to the parietal lobe. Sensory relay to the parietal lobe. How about here? Good. Hypothalamus. Many functions, right? We got, that's right, blood pressure, water balance. Good. Wake and sleep. Body temperature. This is all good. ANS control, hunger, salt balance, and it controls the pituitary. How about here? That's right. That's our pituitary gland. It's the master gland of the body. Controls most of the major hormones of the body. What about here? What do we find in this region? That's right. Epithalamus, right? The epithalamus, also called pineal gland. It's also part of sleep and hibernation. Next, let's take a look at the mesencephalon in midbrain. Mesencephalon in midbrain. The corpora quadrimini. What are they? That's right. Superior colliculi and inferior colliculi. Remember, there's one on each side. So there's 2 superior colliculi, 2 inferior colliculi. That makes 4. So that's how you get that quadrimini. That arrow's pointing to what? That's right. Superior colliculi, responsible for visual reflexes. It's that top bump. Think about your eyes are on top of your ears. Look at the red arrow there, pointing at the inferior colliculi, auditory reflexes. So superior colliculi is visual reflexes. Inferior colliculi is auditory reflexes on the bottom. How about here? That's right. Midbrain, right? All of the tracks from the cerebrum down to the spinal cord. We also find our origin for cranial nerve number 3. What's the name of cranial nerve number 3? What's the name of cranial nerve number 3? That's right. Oculomotor nerve, right? Oculomotor. What's the modality? SE, right? Oculomotor nerve. What's the foramen of exit for cranial nerve number 3? Yeah, this is all going to be on that exam. That's right. Superior orbital fissure. Superior orbital fissure, we have cranial nerve number 3. That's right, 4, 5, 1, and 6, all exiting the superior orbital fissure. But we digress. Let's get back to this. Now, we're going to take a look at the metencephalon. Metencephalon. Remember, metencephalon arises from the rhombencephalon division, the hindbrain. This is where we're going to find That's right, the pons and the cerebellum. Remember, cerebellum, when you think cerebellum, think motor coordination, memory for learned motor patterns. For example, walking, driving, riding a bicycle, playing an instrument. And right in the center of that cerebellum, we have what's called the arbor vitae. That's those white tracks you see in the center of the cerebellum. Arbor vitae, which means tree of life. So here's some arrows here. The arrow is pointing at the cerebellum. This arrow here is highlighting the center, which is called the arbor vitae, those white tracks. How about this arrow here? That's right, the pons, right? Pons, responsible for relay of sensory information from the cerebrum to the cerebellum. Good. Okay. And the other division of the rhombencephalon, remember rhombencephalon becomes myelencephalon as well. So myelencephalon and the medulla oblongata. Here we have the medulla oblongata. This is where we get cardiac control and respiratory control. Very important. The medulla oblongata. Let's talk briefly about the ventricles of the brain. Can you name them? The brain has spaces. Remember, it grew around the neural tube. So these spaces are called ventricles. We have two lateral ventricles in the middle of the cerebral hemispheres, and we have the third ventricle. Where is it located? That's right, in the middle of the thalamus. And we have the cerebral aqueduct between the third and the fourth. That's right, the cerebral aqueduct connects the fourth ventricle. And the fourth ventricle is between the cerebellum and the brainstem. Let's take a look at these ventricles. There's our thalamus. There's our hypothalamus. There's our pituitary gland. There's the that superior and inferior colliculi. There's the midbrain. Superior colliculi. Midbrain. Arbor vitae. Pons. Medulla oblongata. Here's the third ventricle. See highlighted there? This is the third ventricle. It's right there in the area of the thalamus. That's our third ventricle. Here's the cerebral aqueduct. And then here's the fourth ventricle. So the fluid flows from the second into the third through the cerebral aqueduct into the fourth. There's our cerebral aqueduct. There's our fourth ventricle. And if you look at this is getting into the layers of the brain. But the one highlighted here, this is the pia mater, right? That's that gentle mother right there on the brain surface. But we're going to get to that. I don't want to digress. I want to keep this in order. Ventricles, remember our function for the ventricles. That's right. Make the cerebral spinal fluid. That's the CSF. What's the function of CSF? That's right. Cushion, buffer, and protection for the brain. And here's a picture of the diagram. Here's a picture of the model, the ventricles model in the laboratory. Let's go ahead and identify some of these parts. Right here, that's right, lateral ventricle, right? That's the right side. Of course, on the other side, we would have the left that we would have the left lateral ventricle. What about here? That's right. Choroid plexus, that pink, makes CSF, cerebral spinal fluid. How about here? That's right. That's the third ventricle in the center of the thalamus. What about here? Good. Cerebral aqueduct between the third and the fourth ventricle. Here? Fourth ventricle. And this arrow is pointing to the left lateral ventricle, visible under the right lateral ventricle. Just to give you another idea of these ventricles, because sometimes it's kind of hard to imagine. Okay, so this is kind of showing, you kind of can see those ventricles here. So here's the right lateral ventricle. There's the left here highlighted. Here's the third ventricle. Our fluid's going to flow, remember, through the cerebral aqueduct, and then it's going to exit. Here's the fourth ventricle. Okay, so those ventricles sit inside like that. Okay, and here's another diagram you might see again. Internal ventricles, pointing at the ventricles. Here we go. That's right. That small hole is the interventricular foramen for the lateral ventricles. And then we have here the green arrow. That's right, third ventricle. It's in the middle of the thalamus and the hypothalamus. And then we have here, good, fourth ventricle. Here, cerebral aqueduct, right on. Let's talk about the meninges real quick, covering the brain. We have 3 layers, right? We have, which one covers the surface of the brain and goes down into the sulci? That's right. That's our pia mater, right? Let's take a closer look at that pia mater. Again, we looked at this briefly, but we'll bring it up again. The pia mater is here, right? It is directly on the brain. Pia mater covers the surface of the brain, goes down into the sulci. We can see it. This is a sagittal view. You can see the pia mater. The spider web-like middle layer. What do we call the spider web-like middle layer? That's right, arachnoid membrane. Let's take a look at that. Here we go. This is the arachnoid membrane. So just to give you some context, remember this is our pia mater, right on the brain. And this is our arachnoid membrane or arachnoid mater, the spider web-like middle layer. Let's keep moving. Finally, we have the very tough outer covering of the brain. It lines the inside of the skull. What do we call that layer? That's right, dura mater. You've seen it in the cadaver laboratory. Let's take a look at that. Here, you can see that's dura mater. Here's our skull. Directly underneath the skull, we have that dura mater. So we have the dura mater, arachnoid mater, and pia mater. Okay, those are our brain coverings, 3 layers.